I'm Britt,
I'm Kevin.
And I'm Kelly.
and this is the So What podcast.
So it is January. Happy 2024.
It just
Woo!
sounds so weird that we're in 2024.
Is it weird
Um,
that it doesn't, like, the changes of New Year's don't feel the same as they used to?
Yeah, because you're
Used
not
to
12.
like when?
I would say before the pandemic, probably maybe during, there was such an anticlimactic, this year's going to be the better year kind of
Mm,
thing that
it never
something,
was.
and it never was. And something, I think something about the pandemic, maybe it's that it gave me permission to go, yeah, sometimes things are just fucked and we need to be able to say that and not have to try and pretend like, well, this year we're going to do better. And no matter how many funny
Mm,
jokes the news says about, well, get your resolutions in, you're going to not be doing them in 2 weeks anyhow, you might as well pretend for
hmm
now. For a long time there was a hope to it, and now it's just like, no, if I'm not doing it every day in the first place, or I'm not making an effort to do
mm.
it every day in the first place, I'm not going to be trying to say I'm going to do it this year. That is also why I like your question. I don't, if you won't mind, I'll just take over and say it now, and then I'll let you
Go
two
ahead,
answer
just ask
first.
it. Just
Is what are you looking forward to in the new year?
you
You
go
know,
first, Kevin.
yeah, so I think Kelly's New Year's resolution should be to make sure that her set is set up before we start recording,
No,
so that
it's
I
my
don't have to
dog.
get
Look at the
distracted
psycho.
by your ring light going in and like all of that stuff. Can you just get your life together, please?
It's my dog, man. This is what happens. He's like, I want to sit with you now and breaking stuff. But I'm not doing resolutions, so try again. What are
Yeah,
you looking forward to the new year, Kevin?
I already told you, you getting your stuff together.
New year is hinging on me getting my shit together. You are in trouble.
Yeah, so my happiness is completely tied up in you. So that's healthy.
No pressure.
Yeah. No pressure on you, and that's really healthy for me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Not
similar to what Britt said, I'm not big on New Year's resolutions. I'm big on there's this practice that I do called the daily death to self, which sounds kind of morbid, but you go to bed and you think about all the dumb things you did that day, or the parts of you that you don't want to carry on into the next day. And then when you wake up, and it's easier, the older I get, the easier I found it to wake up and stay in bed and not get up right away, because it takes a while for my old bones to get moving. But like, think about, okay, how do I want today to look? I also recognize that, as we talked in one of our earlier pods about moments of transition, there are some natural moments of transition. There's moments of change. And so why not use those to your advantage? And, although January 1st is no different than December 31st, use that to your advantage of, okay, is this a time that you want to make some kind of change? Is this what you want to do? I am really looking forward to having a better work-life balance this coming year. I realize that I do not take vacations. I go where my wife tells me to go. And what I mean by that is that she has always just planned our trips. And she's currently in school, and so we've not taken trips. She has taken trips with her friends and like done things, but like as a family, like we've sent our kids to do things with grandparents or others, but like I made it through a year and a half and I've not taken a vacation. Well, I made it through just under a year and a half. In the beginning of November, I was able to get away for a week up in the mountains of Carolina. And so, but it shouldn't have taken that long. And so I'm looking for this year to trying to figure out what that balance will look like.
For me, this year is the first full year in full-time private practice. And it will also be the start of a couple different things I'm launching for my YouTube channel. I'm launching memberships and launching just some different revenue streams, hopefully, looking at just some options on brand expansion and stuff. But for me, like that leads into the start to a little more freedom, hopefully, for my wife and I, for our family, because the ideal situation is that we are working towards either leaving the country altogether or at the very least leaving, having a brick and mortar location and being a little more vagabondish in our existence, bringing her on board the company and just sort of working together and just making it ours. While that's not going to happen in 2024, it's a long range plan. The fact that it'll be the first full year in private practice is a big step towards that for me. It'll be my first full year of not, having a boss, of being my own boss and making things happen for myself as they need to. So I'm looking forward to embracing that more than I had in 2023.
So I just want to make sure that I understand what you're saying. You're looking forward to in 2024 not having a boss and becoming the boss of your spouse.
I'm already the boss of myself.
Oh, say that
right.
louder. I want to see what happens.
I'm already the boss of my spouse. Laughing, can you?
I heard it. So yeah, I can hear that for sure. Yeah. That's great. I love that.
I love you.
I love you too. Oh, you weren't talking to me. Sorry.
Oh.
We'll talk about this later.
Well, you're welcome, Kelly.
Yep. Have fun with that conversation. That'll be non-podcastable. That's what that'll be.
It'll be awesome.
That will be a Patreon exclusive.
Yes. Yeah. Like we need to add Patreon. We need to add Patreon just to get those.
Oh my goodness.
I'll video record it then. We'll actually get video for that argument too. What are you looking forward to, Brett?
Gosh, my life is so like odd and messy and stuff right now. I am working to finish my teaching certificate right now and doing a lot of different like alternative classes and online classes. And it's funny, like I've been teaching, Florida does this great thing where it makes a path to teach for people whose degrees and experiences in other things. And so I'm looking forward to getting more of that done and seeing just how much more of it I have. It's something that I thought I was going to be able to rush, but because of the way government stuff works, the time frame doesn't change whether I bust my butt and get it all done or not. But I also like the idea of getting enough of it done that I don't feel rushed at any point. And then thinking about what having that actually means. I've had a couple, more than a couple, too many conversations with other teachers about the direction education is going and how I feel about that, wanting that to be, feeling like it's definitely a part of who I am, but also not sure if it's the part of who I am that is going to keep me fed and with a roof over my head. And so there's that. And then there's a part of me that kind of wants, when I do get that certificate finished, to potentially do a year or more teaching in another country. I love the idea
That'd be so cool.
I love the idea of travel. I always have. It's one of the things I actually miss about my job at the church is that there was so many opportunities for travel and taking people on these trips and stuff. And I just don't get to do that the way I really wanted to do it. But a combination of timing. Well, time actually isn't too much the problem, because in teaching you have some really clear open spaces that you could put travel in. There's just one other thing in teaching that doesn't exist, and that is finances. And traveling isn't cheap. Even simple in and around the country traveling isn't cheap. Trying to be able to do something that would give me some freedom to travel easier. If I went to teach, wherever I went to teach, there would be a lot more opportunities for that regular, simple hop on a train and go here.
Yeah.
And now I'm checking out a castle or walking through a Buddhist monastery or something. And those kind of things they're just not as accessible in the way they would be overseas. That's something that is, as I continue to make work and progress on the teaching certificate, gets more real. And also, as I tell people that are close to me, it feels more real. And I feel like I'm doing that to make it more real, because of it just, there's so many things that I'm a big picture person and I think of these cool ideas, and then I don't tell people, because if I tell them, then I have to either say, nope, I'm not going to do that, or yes, actually I am doing it, or somehow I failed at that. And then that's another layer to unravel. So Yeah, I think that answers the question.
Very cool. So in that piece of like you not having the certificate finished yet and that sort of thing, right? Like I think that people now are more aware of how many teachers do it that way, and that
Oh
we're
yeah.
able to have excellent teachers who are in that process, and they don't have to
Oh
wait till
yeah.
that process is done to be the excellent teachers they are. But is there ever a piece of you that's like, I don't have, I'm gonna pull on our friendship for a minute, right? Because
Yeah,
like we had
please.
these
Yeah.
conversations a lot in
Yeah.
your last job
Yeah.
about like I'm good at this thing. I think I'm good at this thing. I think I should know I'm good at this thing. But also, if I don't have the thing backing me up to say I'm good at it, am I
Mhm.
really good at it? Right? Like, does
Yeah.
that come into teaching at all for you? Like that imposter syndrome, like,
Yeah, that imposter. So
am I?
it's really funny that this is kind of the topic we're doing today, because I didn't mean for this to be a transition. We couldn't have made it a better transition if we tried. I love that. Anyhow, we so I feel like I had more of that. I had more of that in my previous job than I do now,
Hmm.
for a couple of
Hmm.
different reasons. First, my skill at this job is not tied to who I am as a person or who I am
Hmm.
spiritually. And so imposter syndrome was huge, and we've had lots of conversation about this, was a huge struggle for me when I worked for the church. Is it still a
Hmm.
thing that I deal with? Yes, absolutely. It still comes up. But I also like, so there's something weird that I've experienced, and I don't know if I've actually shared it this way, but I have a permission to not know everything in teaching, at least with other teachers, that I never, ever, 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 ever had in ministry. And now there were people that I knew in ministry that I had that permission with. But in teaching, like when I say I don't know some acronym that somebody says from some reading, some reading book they read 10 years ago, no one is like thrown off by that. Nobody is like judges me for that. In fact, I think my willingness to ask questions and try to learn makes them more accepting of me as a
Hmm.
professional in the first place. And it also
Hmm.
makes them more willing to compliment me on the skills that I already possess that makes me good at working with teenagers. And so I I really, it's strange, but when I saw this on our little calendar and we texted back and forth, I like first was like, oh, I have so many things to say about this, and then I started trying to think of like more recent examples, and I was going, I don't have as many as I used to have. Not that I don't have any, but I don't have as many as I used to have. And it was a bit of a strange.
Did that feel good, or was that like,
It's funny. It feels good, and then it feels bad because of imposter syndrome. Like, is it? Wait a second. Wait, have they? Are they catching on? Do they realize the other thing about like not everybody I work with actually? I think there are people that I work with that don't recognize that technically I've only been teaching for 3.5 years, almost 4 years. There are people that when I don't know something, they're confused at first, and then realize, oh, that's right, you didn't learn, you didn't go to college to teach, you don't have, like, your degree isn't in teaching, it's in something else. I think something else, so we all kind of at times we roll our eyes about it, that there's all this like extra training and things like that, but there is in education, one of the positive things in education, the recognition of being a constant learner and knowing that everybody needs to kind of constantly learning and growing. I've heard that as a value before, but there's a difference between hearing a value and seeing it played out that way. And so, and in education, at least in the space that I'm in, have seen it played out that way pretty often. Is it always that way? No, of course not. Do I always want to stay after a long day of school? It's just a weird experience for me to not have the job I'm doing reinforce my imposter syndrome stuff, and it has made it a lot easier to deal with. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it seems to come up more in personal stuff now than in professional stuff.
I was just going to ask that question: is how is imposter syndrome being handled in your personal life these days?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's bad. It's still bad. Some of it is helped with like therapy. Some of it is helped with being able to be honest. Well, learning more about, like, I have known for a long time that I had ADHD, and I have known that it's been a struggle and it's caused problems in my life a number of times. And it's just, I keep learning new things about it that I didn't know, that I used to like hate myself for, or feel like I was an imposter because I pretended this thing or whatever. And now I'm like, oh, that's actually probably a result of this condition, that my brain doesn't produce enough of this drug to keep me focused on things, to help me remember something 2 seconds after I see it. And strangely enough, some of that has come from social media and creators who are sharing their own personal stories on how ADHD affects their life and things. I remember when I first was on my own, I remember one of the first times I really was like, oh, this is going to be a problem if I can't figure this out, is I nearly had my power cut off, because for like 3 months in a row, I would get the power bill, I would pull out my checkbook, I would write a check, I would put it in the little envelope it gave me, and I would sit it on a counter because I didn't have a stamp. And I needed to go buy stamps. I'm like, cool, I've done all the things. All I need is a stamp. That's all I need. I can do that. And if I sit it right here on the counter, I won't forget it because I will see it. That's not true. That's not how that works. Then I would go, cool, now I'm going to eat dinner. And I would eat dinner. And the next morning I would wake up and I'd get ready and I'd be walking past and I'd see that envelope there. And I go, oh, that's right. I got to get stamps today. And I'd walk out the door and go about my day. And I'd come home and I'd throw my keys right on top of that envelope. And I go, oh, that's right, I needed to get stamps today. Well, I can't go out now. It's too late. The post office is closed, or I don't want to go to Publix. I got to get them tomorrow. I'm going to leave my keys sitting on top of it. So when I pick up my keys, I will see it and remember, go get stamps. And then I will write it on my hand or something, go get stamps. The next morning, I would wake up late. And after waking up late, I would rush, and as I grabbed my keys, I just kept running, and something would happen with the envelope that was under the keys. Is the envelope would then get pushed onto the floor or back onto some other part of the counter, and then I would come in, and there would be no envelope there anymore. Oh, good, I mailed it. I remembered. My brain would say, even if I didn't say it, my brain would tell me that, and then cool, I'm good to go. Until I get another letter in 3 weeks that says, hey, you didn't pay last month. I go, I totally paid. I wrote a check. I did oh no, where is that? And then I'd go searching and I'd find the crumpled up, probably some kind of weird stain on it from sitting like next, like getting pushed off the shelf or pushed up, or it'd have a boot print on it because I would have set shoes on it to take them off when I came in. And then the same process would happen for another week and a half. And people without ADHD do not, and cannot understand the amount of desire somebody has that struggles with that to actually be able to remember the thing, to do the thing that they know they need to do, that they understand, that it matters, that it's important, and then they just don't. And it just can't. It disappears. It's gone. And oops. And then my favorite is, for a long time, it wasn't that my brain didn't work, it's that there was a moral failing. I'm just a bad person for not being able to remember this thing, because clearly it's important. You clearly don't understand as much. It must not be important to you. You don't see how important this is. I'm like, no, I really do, I swear. And it's the same, like sometimes it's bigger things like forgetting to pay something, and sometimes it's little things like a cough drop. Like I just read a thread, or I saw a thread that was somebody for leaving a cough drop that was melting on their dash, and like, oh, I got to get that cough drop off. And then like that same, like a similar story that I just told about the other thing, but it was just a cough drop. I think the imposter syndrome comes in for me when I know what I need to do with certain things. I can't do it. I try to do it. And then somebody asks why. And I just go, I don't know. I tried. And they go, and then they they give you that look that's like, did you really? And I don't even feel like at that point, well, I'm not even going to argue about it, or I'm just going to accept that guilt and upon myself of going, well, yeah, I guess I should have. I don't really have an excuse. I don't really have that's just some kind of weakness or some other. It just comes back to some level of moral or personal failing.
Yeah, we're so good at shooting all over ourselves.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's I love that. I love this shooting.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up. So you would compliment.
I know. Well, I feel like I've complimented you on that before. It's one of those. Yeah. It's because I do that a lot in a lot of different areas of my life, and it's actually part of where the imposter syndrome comes from, because I go, well, I should have done this. I should have done it this way, or I should have done it that way, and that because I didn't do it the right way, whatever that way happens to be, that is just evidence that I'm not really the right person, or who I'm supposed to be, or as good as I'm supposed to be, or whatever supposed to be that is there.
Yeah. So when you were talking about the electric bill, I thought about the cough drop story, because I saw that.
Oh, okay.
Just recently, and I saved a little snippet of it into my like camera reel on my phone. And the quote at the end, it says, "But you don't understand. My whole life is like that. I see something that I mean to do, and then I don't do it. It's not just the trivial things like the cough drop," and I'll ad lib here. It's the big things too, like paying my electric bill.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do not, Kelly, I do not appreciate you asking about Britt's personal life with imposter syndrome, because I've lived my entire life not thinking that imposter syndrome could be about your personal life. And now I have a whole background to explore with my therapist. So whatever.
Yes.
Job security for your therapist. Therapists unite.
Yeah, I'm sure that was like a backdoor channel. Hey, make sure you ask about this.
How does that show up for you?
So I've only thought about imposter syndrome in terms of work until you asked that question. I didn't know that it could show up in terms of personal life, and it completely makes sense now. So like that's a whole thing that I'll deal with. Yeah, so I'm gonna try to set that aside and then not forget about it and deal with it at some point. So there's that whole
Forget to pick up your psychological stamp, Kevin.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna lose that cough drop. Give boot prints all over it. So yeah, a couple years ago, before I really had a regular appointment with a therapist, and before I got my wonderful medication that I take daily to help me, as I say, take the edge off, I struggled big time with imposter syndrome. And it was all about work. And I talk a big game. And one of my sayings is that all my bravado was false. I don't I pretend like I'm a big deal, but I really don't think that I am. And so syndrome shows up for me with the question of like, what happens when they find out that I'm really not who they thought I was? Yeah. What happens when people find out that I'm not who they thought they were getting? And in my job is kind of weird because somebody else tells me where to work. I don't get to interview for jobs or anything. It's in a lot of ways, it's similar to the military where they're like, yeah, no, go there and do the thing. Years ago, I thought that I had to be somebody that I wasn't, that I had to be this caricature of, and depending on the day, I could name any number of people. I need to be more like this person, or I need to be more like that person, but I'm not that person. And so what happens when they realize that I don't have those gifts that they thought? So that was like imposter syndrome. I was worried about leadership. And then members of my church at my organization I was worried about. What if they realize that I'm not gifted in this area, or that I don't have these things? I'm not dealing with that now, which is an interesting thing to kind of delve into. I think I'm more comfortable with who I am, my gifts and graces, and my shortcomings and all that stuff. Imposter syndrome was my hyper focus for a couple months years ago, and I found out that it is more prevalent in millennials than any other generation. And I thought that was really interesting. Thinking that I had to be somebody else, which is where that phrase imposter syndrome comes from. People think that you're something different, but just be you, as hard as that is to do.
I think for me, that imposter syndrome piece it shows up really weird, right? So for most of my friends who are therapists, it shows up in the I am not enough to help my client in this way. For a lot of therapists, that is a very real thing. And so sorry to anybody out there who's in therapy. I will tell you that at some point your therapist has probably looked at you and gone, I don't know if I'm helping this person as much as someone else could help them. Like what if there's another therapist out there that could help them more? And that's like what we want as therapists, is for our clients to feel movement, to feel healing and all that. You know what I mean? So, but
I
for
thought
me,
y'all just wanted money, which is why you drag it on so long.
well, see, that's a fun fact. The dragging on so long is 100% the client's bag. Like that's on the client. How long it goes on for is on the person. Usually, there's probably exceptions.
I want to continue this tangent that I got us off on.
Yeah.
I had a therapist once tell me, "Okay, you're done," and I was like, "What?" And they were like, "Yeah,
You
no,
sure?
we've solved the issues that you've got." I was like, "No, no, I have so many more." And they're like, "No, we're good." So I don't know if I got fired from therapy, but yeah, I was told word for word, "You don't need it anymore," and I was like, "Yeah, I need to find something else." Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I will say though that there have been times where I have discharged a client because what they needed was not something that was any longer in my realm of expertise, but I would send them away with referrals and other people to talk to. And I have had people who we like step down. We're going weekly, we're going bi-weekly, we're going monthly, we're going every couple of months and that sort of thing. But yeah, to say someone's like done is like, we're fully baked now. Stick the toothpick in, and it comes out clean. I don't think that's like a thing. But so imposter syndrome in counseling is fairly rampant. It gets talked about all the time professionally. I have never actually experienced it in that way. I know that I'm not gonna be the best at everything for my clients, but I also know that it's not about me. And so my job is to reflect and to challenge when needed and to bring down the hammer if I have to, or hold space for them, or pump them up, and all those things I can do because I've done them my whole life. I just know how to do them in a therapeutic way now. Where it shows up for me is in promoting myself or putting myself in places where good things can happen for me. And here's the craziest mind fuck I've had this year. I realized recently that the reason that I do not stand up and take what I should be taking and accept the opportunities that come my way is because I have always believed that if I were to be deserving of something, then God would give it to me. And if I did it, then it was my own steam. And if I did it without him giving it to me, then it was not real or it would be taken away. And that has kept me so stuck for so long. And I began to realize it a couple of years ago, where someone that we all know at a meeting that we all used to go to a couple of years back was in Orlando. And I was sitting at lunch. And Britt, you may have been there. You were definitely at lunch with us. I don't know if you were there for this conversation, but she said to me, "Hey, how come you never teach workshops at this event that we go to?" And I said, "I've never been asked." And she was like, really? That seems so odd. And she said, listed off all these things that I was doing well in my job. And I just feel like you have something to share and something to teach other youth workers. And I just looked at her like, okay. And I didn't do anything about that. And then I realized I got some time from that and realized that I'm mad at her because she didn't make it happen then. Like she recognized it and had the power to make it happen, but didn't. And then she made me feel like I was good at something that I probably wasn't good at. And that piece has haunted me into my new job. Because as a private practice owner, I need to be promoting myself. My YouTube channel is doing quite well at this point, but in the very beginning, I had a really hard time. I still have a hard time telling people I have a YouTube channel. I feel like a dweeb. I mean, I am a dweeb, but for many, many different reasons, you know? But it just like promoting myself and putting myself out there as an expert in a field is so scary for me. And I'm so convinced on a regular basis that I'm not going to say anything that anybody wants to hear, or I don't have enough of something to be worth listening to. And it happens all the time. But that is where it shows up for me regularly.
That reminds me of something that what you just said there about not feeling like you have something worth listening to. So in re-listening to parts of this podcast, I go back to a question asked of me early on of why, like I think on the first podcast, of why this came about. And I said something that I was trying to be vaguely funny or clever or some other mess like that.
I never do that. But
yeah. Well, no, I mean, we need to save the space for Kevin to do that. I should not try to do that. That's because I'm an imposter at that. But I said something about like, well, I feel like I have always had something to say, but I really don't. And what that was imposter syndrome, even being present in that conversation, is that yes, I have things to say, or I have had things to say, but I didn't feel like they were valuable. I didn't think they were valuable for the greater world. I didn't think they were valuable for enough people. Even at times I've been scared to share some things with friends that I didn't think would be valuable enough to their lives. You know, what does my opinion have about this that matters? And so I remember it's funny that you said that feeling frustrated that you felt like you didn't have something to say but were told you had something to say and so on. Thinking back to when I first kind of reheard myself say those words, I was like, man, I wish I could go back and change that, because it sounds like really awkward. And even to my ears now, I was like, well, to me, I hear myself, the imposter syndrome button getting pushed and me getting uncomfortable and then deflecting with, that's why I brought these two smart people around, which is still true. Like I really, really value y'all's opinions and your perspectives on things. And a friend of mine pointed it out and she's like, I don't know why you said you don't have anything to say or contribute. Like, I don't get that. And I went, what do you, she's like, well, you made this joke about not having things. And that, you know, that's for me, probably most recently has been the biggest place where imposter syndrome comes up, is having a sense of seeing something in the world that needs to be addressed or at least talked about. And then at the same time going, yeah, but my opinion really isn't worth that much to that, for whatever 110 different reasons I come up with for why it's not that important.
Yeah, so that made me realize my entire personality is imposter syndrome. I've just started getting comfortable in the last year or two saying this more often. The persona that I have is not the real me. Very few people know who Kevin actually is, because I fear that nobody will actually like Kevin. And so I put on this act, I put on this mask, I put on this persona, and it's all, you know, it's my defense mechanism. I use humor as a defense mechanism. And so I would rather have you laugh at the funny things I say like Britt said at the very beginning, like, I don't remember how you phrased it because I was just thinking of my own woundedness, but like, I don't have anything to say, but I got these two people here. And so, like, I would rather you laugh at that joke than me be vulnerable and say something. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to laugh at that because then it's easy
Mm,
to just play it off.
Hmm.
yeah.
So I said that I wasn't going to get personal. See, here I go again. Yeah, it's so I worked with my therapist for a while. I think I shared this on our first episode of taking away that persona. What's left? Who am I really? And
Mm,
I, depending on how I'm feeling that day or that month,
mm,
like I don't know. I don't know who I am. I don't
Yeah.
know. I do
yeah.
think another area, I don't know if this is imposter syndrome or not, but when it comes to parenting, I never think that I am the parent that my kids deserve. I
Mm,
always wish they had a better dad. I mean, not that I don't try and not that I'm not constantly doing things. One of my friends overheard me, and I do this often as my kids get older, like middle of middle school, beginning of high school, I start asking them. No, I take that back. I've done it like down to the fourth grader. I ask them, how can I parent you better? So like, hey, we had this bad interaction, it didn't go well, and neither of us liked it. So the next time this happens, like what's a way that I can talk
mm,
to you? Like how can I yeah, how can I parent you better? How can I encourage you to like get ready and get out the door on time,
mm.
evolving into yelling at you? What are some better things? I think I'm a pretty dang good parent. I also wish that I was a better one.
Mm. I think a lot of parents do fall into that imposter syndrome slash I'm not enough for my kids, for all the things my kids deserve and will need to be prepped for the world, right? That's so much of parenting is about fear of not being enough, of what's going to happen to your children, of what's out there. There's just so much. I think there's so much fear, and I think every year parents, not parents, like I think the world has so much more fear. And so we put on a braver face and
Hmm.
shrink further back into our
Yeah.
shadows inside. And I just wonder like the trajectory that the world is on or that I'm on, I guess I could say just on a personal level, how how long until I can't reach the inside anymore? Because I feel that same thing. It's ridiculous in when you empirically look at it, and I recognize that. But it doesn't make the feeling of I don't know why anybody wants me in their lives. I don't know. I can't tell you if I'm not actually had a conversation with somebody I had recently made friends with, and then we got, something got crazy, and we were sitting there talking about it and just like, talking it out. And I mean, I don't really fight with my adult friends, that was like a middle school thing. So it was like weird. And I said something about, I can't figure out why you're friends with me. Like, what do you need from me that you'd want to be friends with me? And they were like, why do I need something from you? And I'm like, because that's how friendship works. That's not how friendship works. And I know that. I know that. But also,
Hmm.
if I'm not providing something into people's lives, like, why would they want to be around me?
Where's my value? So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yeah,
I think my biggest problem with what you said is that's a middle school thing. Did you just like I think that's a high school thing also.
I think that's
Yeah.
a I
You
think it's
just
a
that
people
mature that
thing.
you stopped fighting
I
when you left middle school. Like
I think for me, it became so middle school was so dramatic with the fighting with friends and just bullshit stuff that our friend group would do to each other and everything. And I had this group chat with a bunch of people that I went to high school with, and they're fantastic, phenomenal people. And when things are going like to shit in somebody's life, I will chime in, but I largely don't respond to most of the things in the group chat. And I don't because I don't feel like I have anything to say. But I know I don't feel like I have anything to say because I pulled back from all my friendships in high school and was like friends with a bunch of different groups, would bounce around and everybody like, yeah, everybody liked Kelly, like there wasn't much of a reason not to, but nobody knew me. Nobody knew me. Like And it was better that way because nobody wanted to know me, was what I told myself. Why would anybody want to know me? And part of it too, like, let's be honest, part of it was because I've been with my wife since I was a junior in high school. And so that piece of me had to stay very buried and very hidden and very secret. And so even leading up to that, I wasn't very close to a lot of people, but after that, I couldn't be because I wasn't sure who would like me if they knew. Yeah.
Kevin, you said something about how the millennials are experiencing imposter syndrome at a greater rate than other generations. And listening to both of you talk, and there's a lot of mentions about fear and not being enough and stuff like that. And I also recognizing those same feelings in myself. It so often boils down to comparison and comparing ourselves to others. And I was first thinking about this in, when I was doing ministry, and how often I would look at something somebody else did, some cool video they did, or some event they pulled off, or some other thing, and going, wow, I just am not good at that. Or, there was a point where people asked me a lot of questions about like games and stuff. And I remember, I'm sure Kelly, you were around me when I would say things like this, where I was just so frustrated that it was the only thing people seemed to see me for. And I always felt like I had more, but nobody could see those things. And then on top of that, it's like the game thing just didn't feel as important. It was like, wow, that's the silly fun guy, and yet the thing I liked about ministry was those really deep one-on-one, or one on a couple people, in those like super deep revelatory conversations that only seemed to happen in certain spaces and could never be planned. Those were the things that I felt like I thrived a ton in. And so I think one of the reasons, or I would propose that one of the reasons that millennials, it's happening in millennials more, is just how prevalent things like social media offer for comparison, offer this easy way to compare yourself to the best and strongest and most curated version of all the people you know. And I've known people who I could tell how crappy their lives were by how nice their Instagram stories were, like how much more fun things were. It was like, wow, things must be really crappy for you right now, because I know you personally. I know I know what's actually going on in your life. And yet, if I didn't know those things, it looks like you're having the best time of your life and everything is beautiful and wonderful. And I'm like, oh, that is so unhealthy. And then, oh, wait, that's literally how everybody else is going through. And then somebody else who is struggling with something sees that and goes, well, I have to be better. I have to be at least that good. I can't be that good. I can't even pretend to be happy right now, or whatever it ends up being. It's like, man, you comparing yourself and where you are to anything that you see on social media, and often media in general, because it's so slanted and curated and taken care of, that it's like an unfair game. My dad shared it was like a branding thing, where a guy who does digital marketing, he rebranded candy corn. I saw this, I guess a month ago or 2 months ago or something, because it was around the October and stuff, where he's like, let's rebrand candy corn to be a health food. And so he took it and rebranded it into a health food and put stickers and pictures and stuff like that, because candy corn uses honey and it uses high fructose corn syrup, but that still technically counts as a natural product. And so it has artificial colors in it, but not artificial sweeteners. So you can say no artificial sweeteners and you're not lying. And so he rebranded it, and like the bag looked like I could walk into Whole Foods and see it on the wall at Whole Foods and go, that looks like a
Mm.
healthy snack, and like pick it up and go, oh, this is tasty, but it's still just candy corn. And so, and it made me, well, and it's not like I haven't realized that, but watching it happen in live real time and just how quickly he was able to
Mm.
do it and think about it made me just go, oh, nothing I eat or consume or look at is real anymore. What do I know? And then it made me think about, earlier I said how I wasn't experiencing imposter syndrome at my career, my newer career in teaching. And that's not true. That's silly. I'm comparing myself to other teachers all the time because I see some really cool, you know, there's these great stories on Instagram of the middle school teacher who raps with their kids. And I'm like, I'm
Mm.
not doing that. That's dumb. I don't want to do that. But then I see how excited the kids are. I'm like, well, maybe I should try to. Nope, can't do that. Not
Mm.
gonna try that. And then like there's a teacher that I follow who's like real big on the social emotional learning and like starts every class with a self-affirmation and really building the kids up and their own self-worth and stuff like that. That's awesome. I really should try to. And then I don't do that. I still yell at them for being dumb. I work in a smaller school, and I work in a school that has been primarily elementary school for a long time, which means the administration and most of the other teachers there have pretty much only ever really worked with elementary. Middle school is a
Mm.
new thing for several of them, not all of them, but a good chunk of them. And so when things about middle school come up, there are people asking me questions about middle schoolers, and I'm
Mhm.
answering them because I've worked with middle schoolers for a long time. And then I'm going, I'm newer to this teaching thing. Can somebody else with more experience than me please answer this question? And then when one of the administrators asks you a question in front of colleagues about eighth grade math, and you're like, well, yeah, I mean, I know how to, that's just not you don't want to ask me, ask somebody, but that's the reason they ask me is because I'm the person that they need to go to for
That's
that. And
you.
that's really weird for me. and yet I see one of my colleagues does these really great interactive notebook things where she prints out a notebook and the kid glues it in, and they're really just like highlighting stuff. And there I am going, like, my kid's like, all right, write this crap down, you punks. I'm not going to print anything. I'm not going to work that hard for you. And that's, I mean, it's not literally what I'm feeling, but they're going, okay, here, let's just write it down instead of it getting printed out and glued and color coded and all these like different easy ways to look through their notebooks. And I'm not doing those things, and very often wondering, if am I really the best person to be teaching these kids right now? And so many, geez, it happens so often. And now I'm realizing that I was excited at first in some ways that I didn't have as much career imposter syndrome at the beginning. And now, thanks to the rest of the conversation, now I just have both. I have both again, Kevin. I didn't,
You're welcome.
I had one, but now I have both again. So, so there's that.
So to wrap up our very uplifting podcast for the beginning of the year, why
Oh
don't we
man.
do this?
Yes,
Let's
please.
name two things that we do in our own lives or have been able to do in our own lives, or we can say to each other, but I think it's better for our own. When imposter syndrome creeps up, like what do you do? Like what's your go-to? Like what's your coping mechanism? What do you do? So two things each. Let's hear it.
That was actually going to be my question for y'all.
Nice.
How do you combat imposter syndrome? So you said two things. So I'm trying to think of two things. One that I know that I definitely do is, so the more that I've realized what a good leader is supposed to be, the more that I've been comfortable with who I am. I thought that a leader was supposed to have all the answers, but a leader is supposed to know what questions to ask. And so in work, I know what questions to ask, or, I try to think of the questions to ask. Maybe that helps with my imposter syndrome of being a bad parent, because I'm asking the right questions to my kids because I want them to grow into fully functioning adults. how can we have this conversation without it being something that you got to talk to your therapist about in 20 years? So I think one thing that helped me combat imposter syndrome is realizing the truth rather than the false thoughts. So those false thoughts, not good enough, but really like realizing what gifts I do have. I'll think about the other one in a second.
So I'll go because mine is kind of piggyback on yours, Kevin. This is something that I generally encourage clients to do, especially clients who are dealing with anxiety and which can lead to imposter syndrome also. And I've done it for myself now, is I have a list on my phone of 10 things that are absolutely true about me. And so it started out with very simple things like, my name is Kelly. I am a therapist. I live in this town, very short things that are true because that just sort of grounds me in what's real and concrete and can grab onto. It's, very mindfulness oriented. But when things start to swirl and I start to get in my head about whether or not I'm any good in this situation or not, it's not my call whether someone else thinks I'm providing, whether or not I'm providing anything good into something that I'm doing. It's not my call. I don't get to decide if they think that or not. So I just show up in what's true in me and who I am, and remember that list of things that are true. And as time has gone on, they've gotten a little more deep and a little more meaningful, but they're never things that I can in my darkest moment dispute, right? So I can't say I'm a good therapist. I say I'm a therapist. I can't say I'm a good friend. I can say I'm a friend, right? Like those things that I'll be like, but how good really am I? Like I know I have friends, even in my like, when I get in those holes, like I still know I have friends. I and I don't have to argue it with myself, right? So like those, I have a list of 5 to 10 things that are true that I keep on my phone because my phone's always with me or in my hand. And that helps to ground me. So that's the first thing that I do. And the second thing that I do is I actually just kind of I ask my wife, like, I just kind of say like my brain's going here. This is what I'm thinking. Like I need I need a reality check, or I need just for you to like listen to me, or for you to tell me what I need to do to like get myself out of this. And it's really helpful to have somebody who knows you like in some ways better than you know yourself, to be able to just kind of say like, hey, this is not what you think it is. Like what you're doing here isn't what you think you're doing, and just kind of call me out, or just sort of calm me down. Yeah. So those are my 2 things.
So I'm still really in process with this.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that I'm even as far as being able to have 10 things that I could write down, but I have gotten to a place where I can most of the time recognize the spiral, spot the spiral, spot that negative talk that's beginning to spin and get worse and worse. I've gotten a lot better at spotting that. Sometimes it requires me to so I'm often a auditory visual kind of processor, which probably isn't a surprise to most of you. And if Kelly doesn't do really good editing on any of those podcasts, it'll be evident to anybody else who listens to me talk, because my rambling is me processing. That's what my brain is doing. Sorry.
Apologies needed.
But one thing that has helped me is having close friends who recognize that about me. And like when they see either a text or hear something from me or something like that, sometimes they don't respond. And that's in a crazy, I'm not, I'm not, no.
It's
So this is
me.
a good, it's Kelly is one of these people. She's not the only one. Kelly is one of these people that and I know, like, let me undo any potential of your own imposter syndrome for feeling like a bad friend, in that I actually sometimes just need to see what I wrote. What the thing I like when I text it and I hit send and then I read it after I hit send and I go, who the hell is saying this crap? Is that me saying that? I should just, oh, now I need to like, and then if you may have noticed, sometimes I send one and then like 10 minutes later, I send a slightly different one. That's because after seeing it written out in front of me, I end up starting to process, and that helps me spot the spiral and begin to make some changes. So that's one. And then this one kind of the second one piggybacks a little bit on the second thing you said, Kelly, in that I don't get to choose when somebody else sees value in me. And I need to be better at accepting that when someone sees something I have to say as valuable, whether it is professionally or personally, it is not my right to tell them they're wrong, to trust me with that. I need to be at a place, I will probably forever struggle with some of those internal feelings of not agreeing that they should be coming to me with it. However, I am getting better at not immediately being self-deprecating and coming up with some silly excuse for why someone would want my opinion on this or my help with that or any of those number of things. So yeah, those are my two: spotting the spiral, and not getting to a place where I don't have to immediately deflect and be self-deprecating when somebody wants to trust me with something.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of rephrase my first one. So realizing that I'm only competing against myself rather than the, social media perfection that people put out there. So like, what is the truth? And then the second one is I've noticed that like my mental health is wrapped up in my self-care. And so when I start to notice like the imposter syndrome creeping in, I'm like, all right, how have I been not caring for myself? And then I start to care for myself. So yeah, those are my two.
That's great.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, it's an awesome place, I think, to wrap up our first
Yeah.
podcast of
Thanks
this
everybody
year.
for tuning in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll see everybody next month in February. And until then, where can they find us?
Well, we are everywhere that you can find podcasts, and also on TikTok and Instagram at So What Pod. So come check us out.
Sounds good. We'll see y'all next month. Thanks for
See you next
listening.
month. Bye.
Bye.